Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of At the Table. Today we have a special guest, Isaac French. He's an entrepreneur and designer and one of the lead hospitality builders of our generation. Isaac came onto my radar last year when he was on another podcast called My First Million and told the story of stumbling upon a 5-acre piece of land outside Waco, Texas, turning it into a micro-resort of tiny homes, and ultimately selling it 2 years later for $7 million, turning a profit of $5 million. But beyond the money, for me, with Isaac comes the attention to detail, the emphasis on experiential hospitality, and the thoughtfulness that he brings into design, art, and nature, but also his writing and his newsletter. Isaac does a great job of speaking to design and entrepreneurship, but most importantly, I think he touched on something that's near and dear to me, which is inspiring people to find their own unique essence, even if that's outside of business, finding their unique purpose, faith, and investing in whatever it may be that they think is their true calling. This was a great one. I'm excited for you to hop in with us. It was virtual, and we're experimenting with that a little bit. So hold tight. Hope you enjoy.
I got married when I was 23 and was actually at the time working as a bookkeeper. I was trying to launch a cloud-based accounting service and had already gotten a bunch of clients and was building that out. I had taught myself bookkeeping and accounting and tax in school because I wanted to have that as like a strong business foundation because I've always been entrepreneurial, but I never enjoyed it. Crunching numbers never really cranked my engine, if you will. So I was doing that for the financial opportunity. And then I just realized like my heart isn't really in this. And is this really the wisest thing I should do, especially at this juncture? I've just gotten married. We're kind of starting a new chapter. And I realized I've always had this dream to build a village of cabins in nature. And I had recently moved back to Texas, which is where I spent the first 12 years of my life. Then our family moved to the Pacific Northwest for a decade. So I'd moved back to Texas and just realized we have, from a business standpoint, we have a pretty impressive opportunity in terms of people. There's 22 million people in what's called the Texas Triangle within 2.5 hours of my home. And a lot of people in that area desire beauty. They love beautiful places, but if we're being honest, Texas just doesn't have a lot of beautiful places, in my opinion. But it does have certain components like beautiful live oak trees and, a lot of little lakes. And so I realized, well, what if I was to craft a little environment that was incredibly intentional and just like a magical place to be, a little world that was complete in and of itself that you could go to and experience and stay at. And so this was kind of the first principles thinking of the idea. I didn't know what a micro resort was. I don't think the term really existed. I didn't know other properties that were similar to this. I knew about Airbnbs and how Airbnb had disrupted the whole hospitality industry. I knew about hotels, of course. But what if you could kind of marry the best of both worlds and create an amazing, remarkable experience that was really well designed? And so that launched me into a journey of searching for land. I was sketching out plans. I mentioned. I don't know if I mentioned that. My grandma was an artist, so I've always done art. I've always loved sketching. And so I just started creating designs. And lo and behold, one morning I woke up. This was February of 2021. And I hadn't even gotten out of bed yet. And I opened my phone because it was just my habit to open Zillow and see if there were any new properties. And sure enough, there's a brand new listing 5 minutes down the road for $133,000, 5 acres. And I had driven past this place over 100 times, I'm sure, but never thought a thing of it because from the road, it was just a bramble, ton of trees, and you couldn't see anything in there. But in the listing, there was a drone photo, and I could see this little kind of like miniature pond in the middle. So I got dressed, called up the realtor. An hour later, was on site. And when I walked on site, I got chills. Like, I just knew this is the place that I'm supposed to build this dream. And sure enough, like as we walked deeper into the land, and I started to see there were like 3 or 4 of these huge, massive live oak trees. And then this little pond, it was just kind of a swamp. But I was like, this is the place. Like, I could just envision that pond being dug out, those trees being trimmed and beautified, and these beautiful Scandinavian style cabins jutting out next to the water with reflections. And so we were off to the races with zero like analysis or research on comps or anything like that. It was like, we're buying this property and we're figuring this out. But the problem was I had $19,000 of savings. And we can dive into as much of the story as you want, but basically I'll just tell you this much. That was February 27th, I believe, 2021. On January 10th, 2022, we opened the doors to Live Oak Lake. It was a seven cabins, really, really beautiful. Yeah, the dream was realized. $2.3 million to build it, and 9.5 months of time, start to finish, to do it. And it's been quite a journey.
You're a phenomenal storyteller, Isaac, and it sounds, and from what I know about you, you are a dreamer of sorts. I really appreciate that about you. And I'm curious, is that something that's always been instilled and encouraged within the family? Or is that something that you kind of had to go outside the box to really tap into and learn over time?
It's a good question, because I don't have like an immediate reaction, and I haven't really thought about it. But I guess I would say dreaming has probably come pretty naturally to me. I've always had a vivid imagination. I remember as a kid going to sleep at night. I don't know if this is a good thing or not, but I was just like so entrepreneurial as a kid that I would go to sleep like almost every night dreaming up businesses I was going to start, and dreaming up like all the details without even knowing what branding was or what marketing was, like how I was going to design the logo, what the catalog, because at the time we didn't have phones. My parents we never had a TV in our home. We didn't have the internet hardly. And so, but we had like catalogs. So we get the Cabela's outdoor catalog. We get, these different catalogs in the mail. And I love to just read through those, look at the products, look at the descriptions, how they sold them. And so in my mind, I was dreaming up, okay, we're going to create garden utensils. We're going to create shovels, but I was going to do it all my way. Like, those were just the objects in my life. And I was thinking, well, how am I going to create it with my brand? And so anyway, dreaming always just happened pretty naturally. But I would say that for this project specifically, Texas grounded me in a good way, and it gave me the landscape to shape those dreams into something real. But like I mentioned, Texas isn't the most beautiful place per se, but yet if you're willing to look, and I think this is true of so many places and so many things in life, if you're willing to look beyond the obvious, you will actually see, you can find and see beauty in anything. And so having that landscape was, seeing it in its roughness, it was a hidden gem, and seeing it in its roughness was the perfect grounding for my dream to actually take shape and meet its match in a way that could bring it to reality.
So cool. It sounds like too, not having access to TV and electronics allowed you and your siblings, I think you're one of 10, if I'm not mistaken, think a little bit more creatively because you were forced to, which naturally pushed you in this direction of, dreaming big. And that's a beautiful thing that I'm hoping as a society we're not losing as we become more tech enabled. I think it'll be a dance. But I want to jump back in the story of Live Oak Lake. You're on site, you very quickly buy the property. Then what happens thereafter? Well,
we get under contract to buy the property to come up with $130,000 30 days later. But like I said, I had $19,000. So I had a little bit of a problem to solve in 30 days. first thing I do is just like call up my dad and just in total wonder tell him this thing that I found. My dad and my brothers still have a construction company in Idaho where I had worked previously, and our family is not rich by any stretch, but they did have, because a lot of people accuse me of like, well, you just came from a rich family and a dad that would give you all the money. What happened is he had a line of credit through his business, an operating line of credit, which if you know anything about business operating lines of credit, you're not supposed to be funneling those into risky real estate ventures. That's like to do payroll to keep your business operational. Anyway, long story short, I convinced him to help channel some of that so we could buy this place while I started talking to banks because I knew we were going to need a big loan. And so for a piece of equity, they kindly agreed to do that. We were able to buy the land 30 days later. And in the meantime, it was such a flurry of the like partly soul destroying aspect of going and talking to banks as a 24-year-old kid with like no real estate experience, incredibly low liquidity, hardly an income to speak of, and this crazy dream. And, you know, a lot of like straight up laughter and eye rolling. It was good for me though. And it taught me to really sell what the dream was to them in a convincing way. Finally found a bank that said yes. They gave us a construction loan. But it was 4 months from the time we got that, you know, from the time I started looking to when we actually got money funding from the bank. And so in the meantime, I was not going to let one blade of grass grow under my feet because I knew time was a huge opportunity cost here. It was just coming out of COVID. And for one, like there was just an internal fire in me that like we had to bring this dream to life. But I also knew like people were giddy to get out and to go stay at cool places. So in the meantime, we used that line of credit to do about $350,000 of the construction work without any guarantee from a bank at that point. So it was a big risk, but that just kind of gives you a tone for how the whole project went. I mean, everything was by the seat of my pants. We ended up spending about $500,000 more than I had budgeted, which sounds like a colossal amount, but my original budget was way too optimistic to begin with. It wasn't just that I spent $500,000 extra. I hadn't fully budgeted. But that being said, there were so many decisions along the way where I knew that we were going to sacrifice that final vision and that experience that I had envisioned that day one when I had stepped onto the property if we compromised on this and compromised on that. And so keeping that vision of what I wanted to feel and, you know, that really applied down to every scale, whether it was like the way we were going to orient the trails that wound through the trees that led to the cabins, the way that we were going to light the landscaping and the cabins, the front gate and the first impression when you walked on site, the first impression when you wake up in the morning from your bed, what do you see? Like every single detail was thought through. And so having that guiding light of, I want to feel this magic, I want to create this transportive experience, helped me. And yes, we had to come up with more money, but I really believe that as kind of a macro lesson here, like where there's a strong vision and belief and conviction really in how something is going to change the world or change someone's life, for the better and create beauty, money will come to that. Like so many people, including myself, just growing up, you know, we weren't poor, but we didn't think we were poor at least, but we didn't have extra money for anything. And so we were always conscious of like, there's very strong limitations to everything we do. And I think that's good. It teaches you discipline, but it can also be kind of a limiting belief when it comes to pursuing your dreams and your ambitions. But what I've learned is like, money is not the problem. Money will come to a strong vision and a strong conviction. What is the valuable thing there is that you actually have the ability to see, and you are a doer. You are actually going to go out and execute on what that dream is. So like having eyes to see and the courage and the faith to act was everything in bringing that to life.
Having creative constraints like that inherently, in my opinion, helps bring a more beautiful project to life. When you have an unlimited budget, sometimes it's hard to really grasp the creative because there's, unlimited opportunity. However, when you have a box that you're working with, which is a budget, and you have to slip in little details here and there that add to the experience, but aren't necessarily like costly, that is when the creative realm starts spinning. And it sounds like you did a great job of that. But I wanted to touch on this subject actually, because I think this is something that a lot of people I know, including myself, struggle with, is this dance of commerce and creativity, and how you prioritize a budget when you are building and not sacrificing on that vision. Is there, or I guess, were there times where you had self-doubt that came up, like you were blowing through budget, or did you always just have strong conviction in that final vision? And with the help of your brother and your father, did you guys, get to a place where you were like, we're not sacrificing anything. This is the vision, and we're going to attack that vision to create what we wanted to build?
There were plenty of moments along the way where I had to pull all the stops to convince them or convince the bank that I needed. The bank was much more of a given. Like, the bank was only going to loan what they were going to loan, and if that wasn't enough, then that was on you, and now you owe them that money. But so the difference had to come in, like, for instance, in budget, in either ways that I could make the money separately or ways we could creatively structure a short-term loan from my family's construction business. So I actually built a $750,000 spec house in four and a half months, which is kind of a crazy timeline too, and sold it and profited like $200,000 on that simultaneous to this, because I knew I needed extra money, and it wasn't going to come from anywhere else. So I just got very lucky too with the timing in this real estate market. But so it was a mix of like being as creative as possible with coming up with the money. I would say that was in service to that dream and to that vision. And it's really hard to articulate because I don't know if I think you mentioned it earlier, but like, I see Live Oak Lake as a piece of art in a sense. Mm-hmm. And I hope that doesn't sound too conceited or anything, but I've always been an artist. And so that's just kind of the perspective that the lens that I look at the world through. And that project, because it was a piece of art, it wasn't about, what's the highest ROI we can get on every dollar spent here? What are the amenities that are the coolest, trendiest things that we can add here? It was, to me, about like, what is the greatest piece of art and the greatest experience that we can create for others to have when they come see this in person? And really, what's the story that we're trying to tell through this property? And that's a mixture of the landscape, the water, the trees, the nature, the canvas that we're working with, but then the built environment on top of that hopefully isn't imposing on it, but that is harmonizing with, and that is, becoming part of the nature there. So money is not a tool and money is not a master. I think the commerce should sustain the art, but the art is what makes commerce worth sustaining. Like, it's all about the art. And totally. The best ROI is not measured in dollars. It's in the delight that you get in building it and that you're giving to other people when they're experiencing it. And the dollars followed. And I think my story is a great example of that. Absolutely. And every step along the way, like, the money took care of itself. But the experience is enduring, and it's living, and it's got an emotional value to it too.
I've heard you talk about the story of Airbnb taking the listings off its platform and you having to get creative with other solutions in order to, keep the project alive. Very quickly, the project went viral, and you had a lot of bookings on behalf of some content from a creator that you brought to the property. It feels like the aesthetic of what you've built is like the funnel for people to book. But once they're on the property, at least from what I've read and seen, the hospitality and the way that you keep people coming back is actually through just your like thoughtfulness when they're staying there. And so I know there's several stories and like things that you've implemented throughout the experience that people rave about. Are there any of your favorites that come to mind so that when somebody is staying at Live Oak Lake, they're feeling like there is that thoughtfulness and it's part of this hospitality that you've curated?
Yeah. Have you read Unreasonable Hospitality by chance?
Oh my God, so good. Will is a genius.
Yeah, it's like my number one book recommendation to anyone.
Yeah, same. That does not surprise me, by the way.
I didn't read it until long actually after we had sold Live Oak Lake, but so much of it just resonated on such a deep level because I think the reason the book was so successful is hospitality. Being unreasonable about hospitality can transform any business or any industry, not just hospitality businesses, because the core theme that you're tapping into is that humans love to feel cared for, a sense of belonging, and welcomed. And that's true wherever you are, whoever you are, whatever your background is, whatever your business you're in or not in. And so with Live Oak Lake, I like to think of it as like you have the mixture of hardware and software that have to come together seamlessly into this magical experience in order to create magic. And this is what, the best tech companies have done so well. This is what Apple has done so well. This is what Tesla does well. And so the hardware, of course, is the built environment, the architecture, the landscape even. And the software is the spirit of the place, the hospitality, that really does keep people coming back. The thought, the care, the details that no one expects, but that everyone can feel when they go there. It's more of an intangible. And so again, like that explanation is also probably a lot more has been more thought out since doing it. But I guess I was always looking during that process of building it. I was always thinking of that moment. I'm going to keep coming back to this moment that I had on day one when I stepped on the property that crystallized, especially in those first few days of walking the property, of what it was going to be to come and experience Live Oak Lake. And a lot of it was stuff I visualized, stuff I saw in my mind, but there was that feeling too. I literally got goosebumps when I walked on the property. And so I was looking for what are those little ways that I can create magic and surprise. And I guess one example I'll give that you mentioned Sam Parr. So I took this advice to heart, but he talks about, he's a copywriter, and he talks about taking, how does he say it? Forgotten bits of copy or like little friction places. So maybe it's like the 404 screen on your website, or like the terms and conditions, or the thank you page after someone like opts into something.
Yep.
And he talks about taking those forgotten pieces of copy and then like really putting extra care into how you write that, because you want that to sing and you want that to surprise people. It's kind of applying that principle to the property. I realized okay, what are the traditional friction points? And this is also a concept that Will talks about in his book of how he took what was the number 50 restaurant in the world to becoming the number one. And I believe the way he did it was by taking his entire team to the number one restaurant, or like his leadership team, and then having this incredible experience, just soaking it all up. And then afterwards saying, okay, I don't want to hear what was so great about that experience. I want to hear what were there even one or two elements where you were like, man, I wish they would have done a little bit more of this, or I wish we would have had a little bit more of that. And so by focusing on not the negative per se, but what are the ways that we could make this even better when you're at the best? That's how he decided what he was going to focus on in bringing his restaurant to number one. And that was obviously successful. And so applying that to Live Oak Lake, I was like, okay, nobody likes check-in instructions. Nobody likes checkout instructions and long to-do lists. Nobody likes instruction manuals. Nobody likes reading long, complicated messages. And these are just a few examples. And so I spent probably 60 hours while we were still building, and we were probably at the busiest phase of construction because we were doing punch lists. But I probably spent like 60 hours on Canva, and I'm not a designer by trade, but designing like this welcome manual that was going to essentially be a coffee table book that would be fun to read, that would contain our story, recommendations, but also like instructions for how to use appliances and fun facts about the property and, you know, the checkout instructions and all the information the guests needed to have to make their story, like to get everything to make their stay functional, but also like fun. And so, you know, I that meant scouring through 60-page instruction manuals for the fancy dishwasher that we had and combing it all down because like there's a few picky little details you have to get right into like a fun to read little 3-step manual. And doing that across parts of the property and bringing that together into this book. So like that's one example where it didn't require any one-on-one interaction with me, but the guests, when they read that, I've mentioned the handwritten notes before that we left for each guest, the fresh baked cookies that we left. These were little points that were systematized, but where the guests felt connected to me and felt like I was caring for them in a very personal way, but they were also scalable, which meant that it made it much more efficient to operate. And I still spent plenty of time over there just because, again, I love people. I love connecting with people. So those are a few examples of like ways that you can just take an obvious friction point and make it better and just attack those details one at a time, keeping that personal connection in mind at every step along the way. And together they will add up to that magical experience where it's like you have the software that perfectly fits together with the hardware that you've worked so hard to create.
Yeah, you nailed it on the head. The personal touches, I think, are so important. And by the way, like none of those cost you anything except for your time, which is what people appreciate. And now I think in a world where everything feels so transactional, like there's so much power in people taking the time to write out a handwritten note or baked, you know, fresh cookies. And that's the power of unreasonable hospitality, is it's just being that next level of thoughtfulness. One of my favorite stories in the book, they had a waiter that was waiting on a table, and a customer said something along the lines of, you know, we've been in New York for 4 days and I never got to try a New York hot dog. And they're at, you know, the nicest restaurant in New York, paying all sorts of money. They run outside, grab a hot dog, put it on a fresh plate, dress it up a little bit, and drop it off at the end. And they're like, here's your New York City hot dog. And people were blown away. But it's those little details of, you know, that cost them $2. But they were aware enough to soak up that moment, take action, and then leave people with a feeling that is hard to describe because they, to your point, feel taken care of. And that brings up a good thought, I think, is like when people walk away from your property, what emotions do you want to have evoked for guests? And what do you think ultimately brings them back? Is it those small touch points, or are there other elements that you're trying to tap into?
Another great question. I think that a lot of people would visit Live Oak Lake to rest and to, you know, for a sense of reprieve. There's a big trend where guests today are booking, just travelers in general, like more vacations, but for shorter periods of time. So like that's the rise of the staycation. And so people want to get away for a weekend, and, you know, maybe they only want to travel 2 hours or an hour or whatever. Usually it's to recharge, to reset. But I think the core emotion that like I want to evoke in myself, in the places that I am, and therefore I think I'm building for in everything that I create, is a sense of wonder. Like I want people to feel the feeling of, like, maybe this is a poor analogy, but like watching a great magician, and you're like, how did they do that? Like, how did that
that's
work?
phenomenal.
You know that feeling? It's like, oh my
It's
goodness,
childlike wonder.
It's childlike wonder. Exactly. Because if you put yourself in the shoes of a child, everything, like we've got 2 little kids, and it's becoming a dad is the greatest thing ever, but it's so wonderful to see the world through their eyes, because you realize everything, the ordinary is extraordinary. It just depends on how you look at it. But anyway, you can say that, but then you actually have to create the setting. In my opinion, you have to tell the story that puts people in the position where they have that, because you can't just preach at them. You need to have a sense of wonder. You've got to do it for them. And then when people walk away from Live Oak Lake, I think they realize, oh, I mean, like I could do that. That wasn't necessarily special, and that it was just another piece of land with a particular vision and all the pieces that came together to create that. But honestly, I think it's just because I'm a builder. I want people to walk away, and maybe they're going to go build their own micro resort. Most won't, but maybe they're going to go create a company or build a family or build a home or build a piece of software, a product that's going to make other people's lives better. But they're going to be inspired to go out and create something that works, something that does something for other people. So I think of good experiential hospitality and creating these settings as storytelling, because just like a filmmaker, you're trying to set the stage for like someone to feel something. You want them to take away, like there needs to be a message in it, and you want there to be a certain kind of reaction that happens, a response that happens as a result of the way that you have structured facts in that case. And so I want people to feel like, anything is possible. Like you can create. I guess I have this core philosophy, the more I've thought about it, that the world needs more beauty in it. And I want to create more beauty, but I think it starts very small. Like I think it starts in your own backyard, in your bedroom, like in your in your little corner of the world. Like how can you polish that little space and just make it a place you want to be? And there's a science to it too. Like for instance, nature is the place. This is like biophilic design. Nature is the place where people feel the most alive. And so all of my spaces are about nature. It's like, how do we bring the outdoors inside? How do we infuse the spaces with natural light, with plants, with finishes, with things that will make people feel connected to nature? So like, that's maybe the science of it. And the art is, like, how do we do it in a way that's beautiful, that, like I said earlier, kind of fits together in the setting? I'm kind of rambling here, but I am.
No, so well said.
I think that, like, you mentioned time, and there's a great quote in that book. It's like 20 years old. The book is. It's called The Experience Economy, and I never read it until recently. These guys were really tapping in, and they come from a very scientific angle, but into like the next iteration of our economy. So starting, if you look at like the economic ladder, we start with commodities at the bottom, and then you go to goods, and then you go to services, and then above that you have experiences, and then they actually put like another rung, which was transformations. But something that they said, and basically they were making the point that the United States and many Western economies are service-based economies, but experiences are the next generation of that. And I would say we're well into that chapter. But something that helped me see like what you're really creating for people. You mentioned time. Time is the currency of experiences. So services are all about time that is well saved, if you think about it. And experiences are all about time that is well spent. And so it's not about convenience or doing the thing the easiest or not having to worry about it. Services play a part of experiences, but experiences are, I'm going, just like you would pay $10 to go watch a good movie and spend 2 hours of your life doing that. You want a certain payoff from that. So it's a nebulous answer, but that's maybe just like a stream of thought of how to think about creating magic for people. And I really do think it applies beyond just like micro resorts. Again, I want everyone to feel inspired that you can create more beauty in the world, and therefore more inspiration to people, because beauty compounds. Like when you experience a beautiful moment, a gesture, maybe it's something like you described, like the hospitality angle of that, of someone like literally playing a magic trick on you by overhearing something and then going and playing 4D chess and getting that thing for you without you ever knowing it. That feeling will inspire you. At least it does to me. Like, oh my goodness, I want to create that for someone else, or in some other domain, some other realm. So I guess it's inspiration and wonder.
A great answer, man. I think that the inspiration piece is beautiful to talk about. And to your point, I think what you want to do is push people to make their own kind of art that is unique to them. So it doesn't need to be micro resorts. What it can be is, maybe a painting or a gift to a loved one. What you're doing is, to your point, like compounding the beauty over time so that people find their innate gift and their unique offering. And that's what we need more of in this world. And that's why I'm so appreciative of people like you that go the extra step to create experiences that do inspire people. One question that came up in hospitality, I think there's a dance between being hospitable, but also letting people have their own space, because what you have created is a way for people to detox, unplug, get that creative inspiration. So if I'm somebody that's looking to build a micro resort or, my own unique space, how do I find that balance between being somebody that is hospitable, but also respecting the space and integrity of a container or property?
I think, again, like this is mostly art to me, so it's really hard to describe it. But like at Live Oak Lake, we have 7 cabins, and when I walked the property, I wasn't even thinking, that wasn't even really in my mind. It was more or less like, okay, we have this canvas. Now, how is the land speaking to me to build on it? And so like, how can I truly like slough off any of my presumptions about it and just be sensitive to like, what's the best thing to build in the best way possible on this land. And I arrived at the individual locations for these 7 cabins. Now, and kind of like subconsciously, I was thinking about, okay, if I step out of my cabin in the morning, what am I going to want to see? And then kind of running through scenarios. Well, what if I'm here with my best friend or for a small family reunion? Like, wouldn't it be cool if that cabin over there was my buddy, and that one over there were my parents or my kids, but yet balancing that with, well, what if I'm just an individual, or what if I'm here on like a romantic couple's getaway? So part of it is like, you have to figure out who you're solving for. I was trying to solve for pretty much all of those different scenarios. But again, that was all subconscious. The thing that was conscious to me was, what is just the best experience that I could have? And yes, I already have a worldview. I'm a dad. I've got little kids. I've got a wife. So like, I'm going to be staying here with them. Like, that was probably my worldview when I thought about it. I didn't have kids at the time, but it was like, how could I create just that magic? Like, how could I create that feeling that is a mixture of like, I'm in this little village with, oh my goodness, I'm in nature and there's all these trees. So there's an element of privacy there and whatnot. That meant 2 of the cabins being on more kind of hidden areas of the property, which offer a slightly different experience. So it's not as, communal, so to speak, around the lake. But kind of the core experience there is that there's cabins nestled around the lake, but each one is really just it's a responsiveness and a sensitivity to the land itself. And it may sound woo-woo, but like the land really will speak to you. Like, I believe exactly how you should build on it and what you should build. Again, that's a lot more art than science. And it's hard to like codify that. There are principles and whatnot, but I don't know if that answers it. It's a good question.
No, I think it's very well said. I've also heard you speak to the way that you communicate with guests. Like, you have, some guidelines on being, when you're away, telling them you're going to be away and making sure that they just feel like they're taken care of, but also respecting that space. So you're available if they need you, but you're
Exactly.
not too like enforcive with your time or presence.
Yeah, I think one more point I'm glad you reminded me of that. To the answer would be, I really value being able to think for myself, but the subtle cues that will guide me. So again, like to use film as an example, in my opinion, like a great film, everything is not spelled out for you perfectly clearly, but you trust the filmmaker, you trust the storyteller. And so there may even be pieces that you're like, well, how does that fit in with the narrative here? Or that feels unresolved. And yet you trust the creator of that. And then by the end of it, sure enough, everything will come together and there's a payoff, but they're not spelling it all out for you as you go. And so in the same way, like the way that you're showing hospitality is, I'm here, I'm in the background, but I am not imposing on you, versus even like we stayed at, I think the fanciest place we've ever stayed at is Amangiri. Yes. And it was over $6,000 for one night. I mean, it was a crazy, remarkable experience. But let me tell you the honest truth about it. I've had better hospitality. It wasn't technically more excellent. Like Amangiri was the pinnacle of technical excellence. But in the sense of like the way everything was done so properly and the feeling of like people doing everything for you, and it's fun to feel pampered at least once in your life. That's not my ideal experience. My ideal experience is a lot more autonomous, like where there are cues, there are, let's say, trails. If I want to take a little adventure, that I can read about that guide me, but that also like, again, have a sense of mystery to them. And maybe it gets a little bit more difficult to find in areas and there's not as much signage, but that's all for a purpose. It's to kind of create that sense of wonder and mystery to you. This is just one example. Or like everybody hates, front desks and check-in experiences at hotels, I assume. I do, at least. And so by removing that from the experience that someone would have when they come to stay there, you're giving people back more time that's well spent. You're not being more efficient in the way that you do it, or more. And maybe there's something to be said for like giving them an experience even through, like at Amangiri, for instance, like there was probably a 20-minute check-in experience, but they made it fun. Like they bring you the hot towels and they bring you the snack and all these things. I'm glad I experienced it personally. I'd rather have that time with my wife, sitting on our porch with the fire, looking at the view, or doing something else. Anyway, so that's like a personal preference thing. And I think that that's true for a lot of folks. So I was just trying to cut out anything that's unnecessary while also still being there, obviously, when they need you. Plus, from a business operating standpoint, it is a more efficient business, obviously, to be staff light and just be more strategic and intentional about where those touch points are.
Yeah. Two thoughts real quick. Number one, you mentioned like a trail and having that wonder. I think that's also like an analogy of sorts for hospitality, like guiding someone to the start of the path, but then allowing them to walk the path on their own to find their own unique way. And that's like an analogy for life, in my opinion, and Dharma, and like how you find your own unique purpose, right? Like people can show you and lead you to the start of the trail, but you have to find your own unique path that's for yours to really explore. And then on the other point, man, like something at the beginning of this you mentioned was Will taking his team to the nicest restaurant and not necessarily saying what we liked about it, but what we would change. And ironically, you just did that with, the world's top hotel. So I think that. Yeah, cool to hear you practice what you preach. And I think those touch points are very unique. So I'm glad you mentioned that. We've talked a little bit about Live Oak Lake. You've talked through this in detail on other podcasts, and I'll link all these other ones because you do a phenomenal job of getting into the details. But I haven't yet heard you talk about your writing, which is a unique gift to you, man. And for me, digging in there and seeing you connect to your family and just your lessons that you've learned along the way was really beautiful. I want to dig in there a little bit. And one theme that I saw throughout, I'm going to read you a quote and then ask you to explain it a little bit. But you said something along the lines of excellence comes from subtraction, not addition. Prune relentlessly. How would you describe that, and where did that come from?
Yeah. I'll just tell a little story. I mentioned my grandpa built homes, and my grandparents lived on a farm 5 minutes down the road from our family growing up. And so they were very influential in our lives, and we were eating together as a family, usually like once a week. We had dinner together. And when they bought that farm, though, similar to Live Oak Lake, it was just this, huge. It was actually huge. It was like 130 acres, but just this jungle of greenbriers and weeds and poison ivy and all the stuff. And so growing up, my brothers and I would take turns working at, a few hours a week, helping my grandpa clear that place out. And he was such a methodical, intentional person. And I didn't fully appreciate it until much later in my life. But I guess he had a certain way of doing things that is so hard to teach, except for actually living it and believing it and doing it. And he just did such a good job of that. And so as an example, like, he ended up, because he was a craftsman, like he was a master of his craft. He ended up building incredibly beautiful homes for clients. He built a U.S. president's home.
Wow.
He built, like, incredibly beautiful masterpieces of homes, but he lived in a 20-foot travel trailer for 20 years. Like, all that whole time growing up, he and my grandma lived in this little travel trailer that was 20 feet long. That was probably $1,500. And it was always perfectly well kept, but like junky, you could say, because he had a belief that, he didn't want to take on debt, and he wanted to save up, and he wanted to plan. Like, he was such a meticulous planner, planning out his homestead and building his home. And he did that for 20 years. But when he built it, the house was, it wasn't huge. It wasn't a mansion. It's probably like an 1,800 square foot home, but it was so beautiful and so well done. And everything he did was like that. So he had a little shed on his property for years before he built the house that became his home office. And I've written about this too, but growing up, when we weren't out clearing, poison ivy and greenbriers or mowing or whatever, like in Texas, it's hot in the summer. And so we would be inside. And I remember as a little kid playing with toys under his desk while he would be up, working on a set of plans or responding to an email or whatever for his project. And there was always the perfect music in the background. There was the perfect smell. My grandmother made soap in the back corner. And so, like, there was this beautiful scent and the lights were always set just right. And there was just a feeling that he created. So anyway, I say all that to say that he did fewer things than other people. You could say, like, he didn't try to grow his business the fastest. He didn't try to build and live even at his means. He lived well below his means. But when he did anything, it was done so well and with so much care and with so much intention. It made a mark on me that totally changed my life. And my grandpa actually passed away a couple years ago, but I was going through his archives a few weeks ago. I was up in Idaho, and the last few years of his life, he moved up to be closer to my family because that's where they live now. And when they moved him out of his office, they took all of his like old archives. So I was looking through, and it was just deeply engrossing to go through all of his records, just file folders. I've never seen more organization and like better record keeping in my life than this. But he had these books of like, and this is just one little example of business cards. And I just stumbled upon this. And everywhere he would go, he would keep these records of all the people that he met if he needed anything. And it was so well put together. It was almost like reading a photo album, the way he did it. So anyway, I guess I'm just sharing all that to say that I can't take credit for that philosophy, but it was deeply ingrained in me through my parents, my grandparents, our entire way of life growing up, that a commitment to excellence, to craftsmanship, and I guess in my words, doing fewer things, but doing them better. And that's kind of, and thinking about that, I realized excellence comes not from addition, but from subtraction. There's a great quote, I'll just end with this, that I found. I think it was, you've probably heard this, but I think it was Michelangelo, the obviously the famous artist and sculptor, who said this, but he said, "I saw the angel in the marble and carved it until I set him free." And it's this idea that like every block of stone has a statue inside of it, and it's the task of the sculptor to discover it, not to add, but to take away what doesn't belong. So that's become a philosophy in my life. Do fewer things and do them better.
Such good advice, man. And I think in today's world, speaking for myself, it's really hard to do that because there's a lot of distractions that can come up. And especially when you are a driven person, to have that discipline to focus on one thing it's a life's work, honestly. Something I'm trying to do a better job of. It's funny though, it pertains to time and where you spend your time on creating art and projects, but it also pertains to hospitality. And another example that you gave in the article was menus. Like if you go to a restaurant and there's like 3 pages of dish options, you're like overwhelmed, right? And you're like, there's no way, it's like 1 out of 50 chance I get something that's good, But when there's 2 or 3 things and the waiter comes up and they're like, this is the best thing on the menu, don't walk out of this restaurant without getting it. That to me is exactly what you're speaking to as well. So the irony is it pertains to both those things, time and experience and selection.
Absolutely. Beautifully said.
Another quick article I want to touch on, and we can wrap after that. Your latest article talks about the perfect project and your experience in coming into fatherhood and reminding yourself that you live in the good old days, which is, again, something else that I think our generation fights with a lot as we can be distracted. Talk to me about your experience in fatherhood, but also ways that you tap into stillness and presence in order to ultimately live in the good old days.
Yeah. So I'll try my best not to sound preachy to you, but it's really hard to have a frame for what it feels like to be a dad until you've had kids. And some people choose not to, some people can't. Totally understand. But for those that do, like, it's just an incredible experience. I think it's safe to say nothing has had a greater impact on me than becoming a father. And I think we touched on it earlier, but it's that sense of your entire priority in life changes because you're looking at, like, what am I going to give to these people? Like, what am I going to, people talk about legacy, and, honestly, the word just is complicated for me because I think it means different things to different people. It's not about like how much of an inheritance you're going to leave to them or whatever, like what the family name means. Like, those are all great, that they can be important. But to me, it's like, what are you going to live out in front of your kids? Like I was talking about that my grandpa did, my parents did for me, that impacts them in such a way that they maybe can never look back and say, oh, they told me to do this or to not do that. But they lived a lifestyle, and through every decision that they made, they were shaping me almost as like a piece of art. And yes, I have my own decisions to make. And when you're very little, you don't get to argue about if you get to brush your teeth or not. That's just like a given. But when you get older, you're going to get to decide what things are interesting to you, what you're going to pursue. And yet, like in my case, my parents put a huge priority on teaching us character and discipline. And maybe this is an unpopular belief today. I don't know, because there's a lot of different parenting styles, but I'm really grateful that they weren't super permissive in the sense of like just letting me do whatever they want. They gave me constraints, and there were things expected of me, and that taught me to have a work ethic, to be honest, to have integrity. And yet they also created the room for me to flourish creatively and to pursue things that were meaningful. So my parents homeschooled us, which was at the time like not a popular decision, but it's what they believed in. And honestly, I couldn't imagine any better education. And so that's what we're going to do with our kids too. And so I think fatherhood has been deeply like humbling and educational, because everything I appreciated about my parents, and the way that they raised us, is only exponentially grown since becoming a dad. And our kids are, the oldest one is 2.5. But it's so exciting to me because I feel like I have an opportunity to truly make a mark. And I think the premise in that story in the newsletter that you're referencing was that I'm a very driven person. And so I'm always thinking, what's the next biggest thing I'm going to do that's going to make a mark? What's the project? Like Live Oak Lake was so cool, but like, now how do you follow that? Like, what's next? And I've realized like the two kids that I have, that we have, my wife and I together, that we have the opportunity to shape are by far the most important project, if you will, that I could ever have going on. And they're especially at a critical place, like where I want to be present for them. And so I'm also so thankful that Live Oak Lake, we ended up selling Live Oak Lake. And I built the Nook, which is where I am today, this beautiful little studio in my backyard, so I could be close to my family throughout the day. And I'm so thankful for that, because it's just provided so much more opportunity for us to be together and for me to hopefully leave the same mark that my parents and grandparents left on me, to leave that on my kids. Who knows what they're going to end up doing? I look forward to seeing the unique gifts that they have and nurturing those in them.
Real quick, I'll butt in here. One thing that is coming up for me when you're talking about this experience with your kids is a quote that is one of my favorites. It goes something along the lines of, people will not remember what you said, they will not remember what you did, but they will remember how you made them feel. And you talking about your kids being your most important project is such a cool, inspiring message for myself and the world, man, because that to me is how we succeed as a society. When you have the ability to create beautiful projects and bring something so unique to life, but to also prioritize your family, your faith, and whatever that might look like to you is a really cool tone. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the point. Like, they remember how you made them feel. It's so funny. Like, that's the heart of hospitality, and that's the heart of parenthood, in my opinion, too. As a father, my number one job is nurturing these children. Obviously, love is at the center of that too, but I want to uncover whatever gifts, whatever beautiful statue is inside of them, and help them to see and guide them, like you said, show them to the path, help them to see what that is and feel that same motivation to make the world better, to make the world beautiful in whatever domain, in whatever way they may do that. And somehow my parents, like, I think, did a masterful job with all of us, and they weren't perfect, but it's very inspirational to me to have good examples and to feel the weight of that responsibility on my shoulders. I just don't think there's anything that can change you as a person in quite the same way. So that's by far the most fulfilling, important, rewarding priority in my life.
Wow. What a blessing, man. And a gift, to have that ability. I'm definitely excited for that chapter, and hearing you talk about it. It gets me really excited as well. I think that's a great one to close on. I want to give you a moment to speak to where people can find you and follow along the journey. Also, any projects you have coming up that you're excited about. But again, I've said it, truly, truly appreciate the work that you're doing and think that you're a guiding light for a lot of people. So hats off to you and your creation, and encourage you to keep going, man.
Well, thank you for your kind words, but you're a kindred spirit, and I really have enjoyed our conversation because, again, like the heart of life is relationships, and I hate getting invites just to podcasts that I feel like are just going to be almost transactional. It's like, well, what kind of value can I extract from this? Anyways, it's always a great feeling when you can just have even over a computer screen, have a conversation with someone and feel like you're connected on a deeper level. And I felt that. So I appreciate it. You can find me at isaacjfrench.com. That's where my newsletter is, and also my social links. My latest kind of creative outlet has been longer form videos. So I've just released my first 2 on YouTube, and I've got about 6 more in the pipeline. And it's a totally new domain that's really different and uniquely challenging, but I really enjoy it. So check me out on YouTube if you want to as well.
We will link all of the above. Isaac, thank you again for the time. Best of luck. Keep carving away at that stone, and we'll talk soon, surely.
Thank you so much, Luke.